My name is Jessica, I'm 34, and I discovered my husband was having an affair with my own sister after she called him a real man at our family dinner. Before I tell you how I exposed their web of lies in front of everyone and permanently cut off the $1,000 I was giving her every single month, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It all began on a Sunday evening, one of those golden, late summer nights that are supposed to feel like a warm hug. My husband, Michael, and I had just returned from a spectacular 2-week vacation in Italy. It was the trip of a lifetime, and frankly, it was only possible because of my job. I work in finance, and after years of grinding, my salary had reached a point where I could afford to be generous. And I was. I believed that the point of success was to share it with the people you love. The first-class tickets, the 5-star hotels overlooking the canals of Venice, the dinners where you don't even look at the prices, I'd covered it all. We were gathered at my parents' house for our weekly Sunday dinner, a tradition that had been upheld for as long as I could remember. The house smelled of my mom's roasted chicken and the lavender potpourri she kept in every room. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, were seated at the head of the table. My younger sister, Amber, was there, with her sweet 6-year-old son, Lucas, who was quietly coloring in a book at the corner of the table. The atmosphere was cheerful. Michael, ever the charming storyteller, was regaling the family with a dramatic reenactment of our gondola ride. He was using a comically bad Italian accent, waving a breadstick around like an R, and everyone was laughing. I found myself smiling, a genuine, uncomplicated smile. It felt good to be home, to share these moments. In a wave of warmth and generosity, I swirled the wine in my glass and said, I was thinking, maybe next year, we could take the whole family on a trip to Europe. My treat. My parents' eyes widened. Amber let out a little squeal of delight. "Oh, Jess, really?" she exclaimed. "That would be a dream." It was in that moment of shared excitement that the first crack appeared in my perfect world. Amber, who had been sitting uncomfortably close to Michael all evening, draped her arm over his. She gave his bicep a proprietary squeeze, then turned her gaze to me. A slow, smug smile spread across her face. She winked. "You're so lucky, Jess," she said, her voice dripping with a meaning that only I seemed to catch. "Michael is a real man, in every single way." The laughter at the table died abruptly. The air grew thick and heavy. Michael just let out a short, forced chuckle and took a big gulp of his wine. My mom, bless her heart, was blissfully oblivious and just nodded in agreement. But I felt it. A sudden, sharp iciness spread through my chest. It wasn't just the words. It was the wink. The squeeze. The look in her eyes that was less like sisterly affection and more like a predator staking its claim. In that split second, I knew with a bone-deep certainty that wasn't a compliment. It was a declaration. That single, chilling moment recontextualized years of my life. For as long as I could remember, I had been the family's designated adult, their ever-reliable safety net. When Amber found herself pregnant at 22 and her boyfriend, Jake, vanished, it was me who co-signed the lease on her first apartment. It was me who bought her a crib and a car seat. And for 6 straight years, on the first of every month, I transferred $1,000 to her bank account without question. It was for rent, for utilities, for Lucas. It was, I told myself, simply what a good sister does. Family takes care of family. But my role as the provider was always a thankless one. My successes were treated as expected, while Amber's smallest achievements were celebrated like national holidays. I'll never forget the year I finally landed a major promotion to vice president at my firm. It was the culmination of a decade of 60-hour workweeks and sacrificed weekends. I called my parents, my voice buzzing with excitement. My mother's response was a distracted, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Now, can you help your sister figure out her car insurance?" An hour later, she was hosting a family-wide video call, practically in tears with pride because Amber had won a third-place ribbon at a local baking competition. My 6-figure salary and the corner office with a view of the city were just a footnote. Amber's lemon meringue pie was front-page news. It wasn't just my parents. I remembered a time, maybe a year before, when I'd paid over $2,000 for an emergency transmission repair on Amber's car. She had cried, saying she didn't know how she would have managed without me. A week later, she was posting pictures on social media, posing with a new designer handbag that cost at least $500. When I gently questioned her about it, she got defensive. God, Jess, can't I have one nice thing? You have everything. I let it go. I always let it go. That night, after the dinner and the real men comment, my best friend, Sarah, who had also been there, sent me a text. That was weird tonight. The way Amber was all over Michael. I don't like it. Please be careful. I called her immediately. You saw it too? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Saw it? Sarah scoffed. Jess, a blind person could have seen it. She was practically marking her territory. And the way he just let her? It was gross. Talking to Sarah, hearing my own unease reflected in her voice, made it real. It wasn't just my imagination. Something was deeply, horribly wrong. The following weeks were a slow-motion nightmare. I became a detective in my own home, a stranger in my own marriage. I started noticing all the little things that had been hiding in plain sight. Michael's phone, which used to lie on the nightstand face up, was now permanently face down. He'd take calls in the other room, closing the door behind him. He started having to work late and take business trips on the weekends, a new development in his cushy advertising job. He was slippery and vague, his answers to my questions coated in a thin layer of irritation. The moment of truth, the point of no return, arrived on a Tuesday night. He kissed me goodbye, saying he had a late dinner with a client from out of town. He smelled of expensive cologne. An hour later, I was tidying up the home office and found a crumpled receipt from that afternoon in the trash bin. It was from a high-end jeweler. My first thought was a flicker of hope, maybe an early anniversary gift. But then, a notification popped up on my laptop from our joint bank account. It wasn't a client dinner charge. It was a charge for two at the Cypress, an intimate, romantic restaurant on the other side of town. A place we had only been to once, on our very first wedding anniversary. The lie was so audacious, so insulting in its carelessness. He wasn't just cheating. He was rewriting our history with her. That night, sleep was impossible. My mind was a maelstrom of anger, hurt, and humiliation. I pictured myself confronting him, screaming, crying, throwing his expensive watches out the window. But the image felt hollow. It felt like a loss. I knew, instinctively, that a messy, emotional confrontation was exactly what they would expect. It would allow them to paint me as the hysterical, jealous wife. I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. I needed evidence. Cold, hard, undeniable proof that would leave them with nowhere to hide. And then, it hit me. The family iPad. A few months prior, Michael had synced his phone's entire photo library to the iPad. He wanted to show my parents our Italy pictures on a bigger screen and, being technologically lazy, had never bothered to unsync it. My heart hammered against my ribs as I walked into the living room and picked it up from the coffee table. The cool metal felt heavy in my trembling hands. I opened the Photos app, my breath catching in my throat. I scrolled past the familiar albums, Family Barbecue, Lucas's 6th birthday. My stomach twisted with dread. Then, at the very bottom, under the Utilities heading, I saw it. A folder labeled simply, Hidden. I tapped it. It prompted for a passcode. I entered his birthday. Incorrect passcode. I entered our anniversary. Incorrect passcode. My hands were slick with sweat. On a sickening hunch, I typed in Amber's birthday. The folder opened. What I saw felt like a physical assault. The air was sucked from my lungs. It wasn't just a few incriminating texts. It was a universe of their secret life. Hundreds of photos and videos. Them in hotel rooms, wrapped in white robes, toasting with champagne I had likely paid for. Them kissing in his car, at a public park, against the wall of a building. There was one photo of Amber, lounging on a hotel bed, wearing one of my silk robes that had gone missing a few months ago. She was smiling at the camera, a cat that got the cream smile that made my blood run cold. There were screenshots of their text conversations, a chronological documentation of their betrayal. They were filled with pet names and heart emojis. And they talked about me. Constantly. They mocked my work ethic, my generosity. They called me the First National Bank of Jessica and the Golden Goose. I scrolled and scrolled, each message a fresh stab to the heart. Michael, the Golden Goose is heading to a conference next week. We'll have the whole house to ourselves. Amber, *perfect. I can't wait. By the way, the monthly deposit came through. Your queen is ready for her king this weekend. Winky face, *. Michael, good. Let's use it to go to that place you wanted. She'll never know. I saw their plans to bleed me dry, for him to secure a major promotion he was up for, and then file for divorce, arguing that his future earning potential was tied to my support, entitling him to half of everything. It was a long con. A cold, calculated, parasitic plan. I stumbled to the bathroom, my legs shaking, and collapsed in front of the toilet, retching until my stomach was sore. I looked at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back was a stranger, her face pale and her eyes filled with a raw, primal horror. In that moment, I felt the foundation of my life crumble into dust. Every memory felt tainted, every kind gesture felt like a fool's errand. For a few long minutes, I thought the pain would actually kill me. But then, something else began to rise from the ashes of my devastation. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was fire. A cold, cleansing, all-consuming rage. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had mistaken my love for stupidity. They had underestimated me. And they were going to regret it. The next morning, I was a new person. The gaping wound of betrayal was still there, but I had packed it with ice. I called in sick to work and made 3 phone calls that would change the course of my life. The first was to a woman named Catherine Royce, the most notoriously sharp and successful divorce lawyer in the city. I sat in her plush leather office chair and, in a voice that didn't quaver, I laid out the entire story, detailing the financial support, the affair, and the evidence I had found. She listened intently, her face impassive. When I was finished, she gave me a curt nod. Good, she said. You've done the hard part. Now, here's what we do. You will not confront them. You will not change your routine. You will be the loving wife until I tell you otherwise. We gather all our ducks in a row before we fire a single shot. Your primary objective right now is to become a ghost. They can't see you coming. The second call was to Jake, my nephew's father. My hands were trembling as I dialed, but my voice was steady. I used the excuse I'd planned, that I was setting up a college fund for Lucas and needed his information for the legal paperwork. After a few minutes of pleasantries, I steered the conversation. It's wonderful you're so involved, I said casually. I know Amber has a tough time making ends meet. I help her out with $1,000 a month, but even then, it must be a struggle. There was a beat of confused silence on the line. $1,000 a month? Jake finally said, his voice laced with suspicion. Jessica, that's very generous, but I pay her $1,200 in child support. It's court-ordered. It's deposited directly into her account on the 1st of every month. I've never, ever missed a payment. Click. That was the sound of the final piece falling into place. The final lie being exposed. Not only was my sister sleeping with my husband, she was actively stealing from me, manufacturing a struggle that didn't exist. She wasn't a damsel in distress. She was a predator. The final call was to my cousin, Rachel. She was my mother's niece, but she was nothing like them. She was grounded, pragmatic, and had a built-in lie detector. "Rachel," I said, "I need you to do me a huge favor. I need a witness at Sunday dinner this week. Someone with a clear head and a strong stomach. Can you be there?" She didn't press for details. Her trust in me was absolute. "I'll be there," she said. "Whatever you need." The next 2 weeks were the hardest of my life. I had to live inside the lie, pretending that my world wasn't a smoldering crater. I smiled at Michael when he came home. I made small talk with Amber on the phone, listening to her complain about her tight budget. I once sat through a whole dinner with Michael where he talked about his plans for our future, all while I knew he had spent the afternoon in a hotel with my sister. I felt a hot, metallic taste of rage in my mouth, but I just nodded and smiled, the perfect, supportive wife. All the while, Catherine, my lawyer, was working in the background, preparing the documents that would detonate my old life and set me free. Finally, the day arrived. The second Sunday. The day of reckoning. I dressed carefully, in a simple, elegant navy blue dress. I felt strangely calm, my veins filled with ice water. In my handbag was a slim manila folder. Inside, professionally printed on glossy paper, were the 10 most damning photos, the most sickening text exchanges, and a copy of Jake's bank statement showing his monthly payments to Amber. The atmosphere at dinner was tense. My quiet composure seemed to unnerve them. Michael kept trying to catch my eye, a nervous little smile playing on his lips. Amber was more brazen. She kept touching him, laughing too loudly at his jokes. She was testing me, pushing the boundaries. She was about to find out I no longer had any. She made her move during dessert. As my mother served slices of apple pie, Amber leaned back in her chair, draping her arm possessively over the back of Michael's. She looked right at me. "You know," she said with that same smug smile, "Michael really is the perfect man." I put down my fork. I took a slow, deliberate sip of water. Then I met her gaze, and for the first time, I let her see the Arctic coldness in my eyes. "You know, Amber," I said, my voice resonating clearly in the suddenly quiet room, "I agree. And I think a man that perfect deserves to have his real relationship celebrated. Out in the open." I reached into my handbag, took out the manila folder, and placed it on the center of the table with a soft, definitive thud. "I think it's time everyone here knew just how close you two really are." I opened the folder. With a steady hand, I slid the first 8x10 glossy photo across the polished wood to my mother. It was a crystal-clear shot of Michael and Amber, tangled together and kissing passionately in a hotel room. My mother let out a strangled gasp, her hand flying to her chest. My father snatched the photo from her, his face instantly turning a shade of mottled purple. "What is this?" he bellowed, his voice shaking with rage as he stared at Michael. "What is the meaning of this?" Michael began to stammer, his face ashen. It's not, she." Amber immediately burst into a torrent of loud, theatrical sobs. "He seduced me," she wailed, burying her face in her hands. "I'm so vulnerable, he knew I was lonely, he took advantage of me." As predicted, my father's rage instantly shifted from Amber to Michael. Ever the noble protector of his precious, blameless baby girl. "You bastard," he snarled at Michael. "You did this to my daughter? To our family?" I let their pathetic theater play out for a full minute. Then, I spoke, my voice slicing through the chaos. "Oh, she's a victim, all right. But not of Michael." I looked from my mother to my father, my gaze unwavering. "She's a victim of your lifelong refusal to hold her accountable for anything." I slid a second document across the table. It was the printout of Jake's bank statement, with the $1,200 custody payments highlighted in yellow. "She's been crying poverty to me for 6 years, all while taking $1,200 a month from her son's father." A fact she conveniently forgot to mention. My father stared at the paper, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. My mother looked at Amber, her expression a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. But before you waste any more of your sympathy, I continued, there's one last thing you should all hear. I pulled out my phone. I didn't need to connect it to a speaker. The room was dead silent. I pressed play on a single audio file. Amber's voice, giddy, cruel, and unmistakable, filled the air. I swear, it's the easiest money I've ever made. The old cow just keeps sending it, no questions asked. She's paying for my spa days and my dates with her own husband. She's so desperate for a happy family she can't see what's right in front of her face. It's pathetic, really. The silence that followed the recording was absolute. It was a crushing, suffocating void. Amber sat frozen, her fake tears dried on her face, which was now a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. Michael looked like a man who had just watched his own ghost walk through the door. I stood up, the chair making a soft scraping sound against the floor. The divorce papers were filed this morning, Michael. Our joint assets are frozen, and my lawyer will be in touch. And Amber, I said, my voice devoid of all emotion, your monthly allowance has been permanently terminated. I suggest you update your resume. My mother finally broke. Her voice trembled as she looked at me, her eyes pleading. Jessica, how could you do this? How could you tear our family apart in your own parents' home? I looked at her, at this woman whose love had always been conditional, and I felt a profound sense of release. I didn't tear it apart, Mom, I said, my voice steady and clear. I just turned on the lights so everyone could finally see it was already broken. I turned to Rachel, who was watching the scene unfold with a grim, validating nod. Ready to go? She stood up immediately. As we walked to the door, I heard a desperate plea from Amber, Jess, wait. I didn't turn around. I didn't even break my stride. I just pulled the front door closed behind me, leaving the wreckage of their lives for them to clean up. The 6 months that followed were a blur of legalities and liberation. The divorce was, as my lawyer predicted, swift and brutally efficient. Faced with irrefutable evidence of adultery and financial conspiracy, Michael's legal team advised him to settle immediately. He walked away with his personal belongings and a mountain of debt. Last I heard, he'd lost his job after the scandal made its way through his professional circle. Amber's downfall was a slow-motion car crash. Without my monthly subsidy, her fragile financial house collapsed. She was evicted from her apartment within 3 months. She and Lucas were forced to move into my parents' spare bedroom, and from what Rachel told me, the house became a pressure cooker of resentment and recrimination. Michael, the real man, wanted nothing to do with a broke, unemployed single mother. He vanished from her life the moment she could no longer offer him anything. One night, long after midnight, a frantic, drunken pounding echoed through my apartment. It was Amber. She was screaming obscenities, yelling through the door that I had ruined her life, that I was a cold, heartless bitch who had made my own nephew homeless. I didn't engage. I just calmly called the police. They found her intoxicated on my doorstep and arrested her for public drunkenness and disorderly conduct. That arrest was the final straw for Jake. Armed with a police report and a clear pattern of Amber's instability, he filed for emergency full custody of Lucas. The court granted it. The journey wasn't just about them, though. It was about me. I started pouring all the energy I had once spent on my toxic family into myself. I excelled at work. I started working out again. I reconnected with friends I had neglected. I went to therapy. I began to rebuild. I didn't cut Lucas from my life, I strengthened my bond with him. I became a constant, stable presence for him, helping Jake with school pickups and attending his soccer games. I was showing him what real, unconditional family love looked like. It's been over a year now since that last Sunday dinner. My life is quiet, peaceful, and entirely my own. My parents have sent awkward, fumbling apology texts. I accept them, but I keep a healthy distance. Amber completed a court-ordered rehab program and is, I hear, trying to piece her life back together. I genuinely hope she does, for her son's sake. David, my old colleague who respectfully kept his distance until my divorce was final, took me out for coffee a few months ago. It was easy and nice. We're taking things slow. It's a relationship built on honesty, a concept that feels refreshingly new. The other day, a handmade card arrived in the mail. It was from Lucas. Inside was a crayon drawing of two stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. One was labeled Aunt Jess. The other was me. I smiled, a real, uncomplicated smile, and stuck it on my refrigerator door. It's the first thing I see every morning. It's a reminder that sometimes, you have to burn down your old life to build a new one. A reminder that you have to choose yourself. You have to save yourself. And that true family isn't just about the blood you share, but the respect you give, the honesty you uphold, and the peace you protect. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It was a long and painful journey, but sharing it feels like the final step in my healing. I know so many of you have had to navigate your own difficult family dynamics. I'd love to know, have you ever had to make a radical choice to protect your own peace and self-respect? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, I'd be so grateful if you'd give it a like and subscribe for more. Remember, you are stronger than you think, and you are not alone.